I accidentally wrote a short story from hell. I would like to share my experience because you might find it amusing and also insightful in a life lesson sort of way. The story, called Turing Duty, is about a world where you can scan your brain and upload yourself to live digitally. But there's a catch. You can live as a physical human being or as a digital one, but you cannot do both. You cannot just clone yourself. And if you do decide to upload yourself, you first need to go through a Turing jury evaluation. This jury looks at you and your copy and tries to ascertain whether or not those are identical. And if yes, your physical body is destroyed and you can live on as a digital human being. If not, you need to repeat the application. The key conflict is that the individual who is being assessed changes his mind and doesn't want to be uploaded anymore. He doesn't want his physical body destroyed. He just wants to live on. But his copy is already created and also is an individual with rights and so on. So that creates a lot of complications. Now you might be asking yourself, how is this controversial? And yeah, I agree, this is not some crazy insane premise. The controversial part comes in the reactions that I received to the story. Generally, as a writer, I do my best to improve my craft to make my writing as good as I can. So I sent this story to my beta readers, to a professional editor, and to a famous science fiction author I'm lucky to have a contact with. And the reactions were different, let's put it this way. Let's start with the good stuff, the editor. I hired him on Reedsy.com, which is a kind of expensive website, but they're vetting their specialists. And on top of that, he had more than 100 glowing positive reviews, and the ratings I saw were 5 stars in each category. I hired him for a combo developmental plus copy editing. Developmental editing being kind of story structure, character, plot, and general storytelling. And copy editing is prose, sentence level, and so on. His comments were super encouraging. He really connected with my story, and even though he changed a few phrasing issues here and there, in general it works as is. I at first thought that I didn't get all the files that were supposed to come with his edit. Usually a developmental edit includes in-depth comments on, the weaknesses of the story, what you can improve and so on. All I got was just phrasing improvements, but really nothing on the substance. So I asked him, hey, is there anything I can improve in the story structure, in the plot, or anything like that? He said, no, it's really rare that this would happen, but sometimes the author sets out to achieve something and does that. So no comments. Good job. Well, I was, of course, deeply flattered, but it seemed a little strange. Not the least because after sending him the manuscript, I was rereading it myself and actually found a bit of dialogue that kind of was a little bit clunky, and he didn't correct it either, so I couldn't fully trust the glowing comments from this editor. Next, we have beta readers. Most of them liked the story, but some were confused by the ending. And this is always very difficult for me to interpret because, on the one hand, I don't like info dumping and I try to give everything through context clues. On the other hand, maybe my writing was just confusing and I was not communicating clearly. So this raised some questions, and definitely the feedback was not as overwhelmingly positive as the editor that I paid money to edit my work. And then the last one was the feedback from the famous science fiction writer. I don't want to reveal too much about who this person is or how exactly I met them, but the gist is this was in person more than 2 years ago, and I happened to steal probably around an hour of his time to pitch my story to him and brainstorm. This year, when the story was finally done, I was like, hey, this is the story we discussed. What do you think about it? What do you think about the result? Well, he didn't like it very much, let's put it this way. He thought the main idea is shit, everything needs to be scrapped, the POVs need to be chosen differently, and so on. Overall, I don't think he said a single positive thing about it, which is kind of refreshing in our world of false politeness. I like when people say it like it is, but on the other hand, it's just confusing because I now somehow need to integrate feedback from the paid editor who just praised everything, couldn't find a single fault with the story, mixed reviews from my beta readers, and an absolute devastating review from a famous author who I respect. Before I tell you my conclusions and what I learned from this all, if you want to read this Pandora's box of a story, the details on how to do that for free are in the first comments. Now, what have I learned from this? Number one, don't trust editors. There are systems with perverse incentives. One such example is Airbnb, where guests rate the hosts and hosts rate guests. And so everybody tries to be nice and ratings end up inflated. Another example is psychotherapy. A good therapist sometimes needs to confront their client and say, you need to cut the shit out or you're going to ruin your life. A shitty therapist is going to enable their client instead and say, yeah, I don't know why all those 3 wives left you. You're doing everything right. Women these days are just awful. And it's the same with editors. A cunning editor that wants to earn as much money as possible is not gonna tell their clients that their book is amateurish and shitty. They're gonna praise it instead and introduce minor corrections so that, it seems like they're doing something. The writers have their ego boosted and they leave a glowing review to the editor. Then they wonder, why does their book not sell? So now when I search for reviews on Reedsy, I look for phrases like, this editor is trying to confine me into what they believe is a good story, but I refuse to do that, and stuff like that. So people kind of being angry that the editor is holding them up to a high standard. With beta reader feedback, I will address it on a case-by-case basis, just clarifying some things, highlighting some other things, and so on. And with the famous author, it's the most difficult thing. On the one hand, some of his criticisms are legitimate. I could see where he's coming from. But on the other hand, I think that some part of it stems from kind of an ideological or worldview difference between me and him. Even in our original conversation, before I had started writing anything, I could already feel that he was not quite clicking with the underlying message or the worldview that I'm trying to portray. Perhaps this is just a difference between me and him. We find different things important to write about. In his writing, he's generally more optimistic and has more faith in the fundamental goodness of human nature, while I have a much more bleak outlook on life, and I like to highlight the absurdities, hoping that that would propel people to be better. So I kind of have to take his feedback and try to extract what is objectively true and what stems from this ideological worldview or world perception difference. It is extremely hard. I don't know if I'm gonna follow his advice and scrap it completely and just rewrite it from scratch, because I still want it to be my story and I want to speak about certain things in a certain way. On the other hand, obviously I want it to be a good story, and if it takes me to scrap everything and rewrite it from scratch to make it a good story, then I will do so. That's partially why I'm making this video. I would love to hear more opinions and would love to understand, is there a kernel of goodness in it, or is it all complete crap? So again, if you want to take a look at the story, check out the first comment and let me know what you think.